Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. Hope you've all had a good week. I'm here with the Duck. Don, how are you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
Yeah, good. I actually wanted to start with the news for a change, and
hmm
specifically with this cruel and cowardly attack that you executed on Twitter, targeting me directly. As the audience will be well aware, and anyone who can read between the lines. And the tweet reads the following, and you're quoting someone sarcastically or ironically or to mock them: "Women today suck. There's no quality anymore." And then says the guy that sits in front of his computer 24/7, has zero ambitions or drive, has barely any friends, barely gives a shit about his own family, has no hobbies, just wants to get laid. The audacity is staggering to me. So I guess the first question is, what did I ever do to you to warrant this type of public vitriol? Like, in private, that type of criticism, it's a conversation I'm happy to have with you as a long-term co-host. but this seems to have crossed some sort of line at the very least. So I'm just wondering what part of my conduct pushed you over the edge into this cruel and unusual act.
Oh no, I just saw your beard, man. I was like, I kind of have to go for it.
Oh, so you're
Um,
Islamophobic now. Okay.
no, but I honestly, I've seen too much shit like that on Twitter. It's kind of crazy how the discourse has gone in that front and on crypto Twitter especially. And I was like, oh, this is just fucking insane. I'd like to say something about it, but just more of like a ingest tweet that rubbed people very much the wrong way, which is makes it even funnier to me.
The
Um,
funny part is, before that, you were tweeting how you should sort of stay in your lane in general, and how if you go off on other topics, you'll seem like an uneducated idiot. And then, like 2 hours later, you're like, you know what? Cracks his neck. Let's talk about like dating and the manosphere and incel culture and whatever else. So that was quite interesting. Although being my
oh,
co-host, you probably have a pretty good insight into incel culture, so it's not like you're
stop
completely
it.
unaffiliated.
Stop it. Stop it. No, honestly, like the best way if you want to kind of look good on Twitter is not
Right.
doing this kind of stuff, but I honestly don't really care too much. It's like if you want to build your audience, whatever, all that cringe shit, be my guest.
Which we're
I
trying
mean,
to
I
do.
know.
Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm.
Yeah, but I mean, you and I both like we both don't really care too much about like okay the follower number. I would
Sure.
say anyway. So it's just kind of like it doesn't really matter. And then you can say your opinions, right? I don't have like Elon Musk because I tweeted about Elon Musk earlier today as well.
Yeah, you're on
I don't.
one. Is everything okay at home? Like, what's going
Oh,
on? You're
oh,
firing on
I'm
all
just
cylinders.
I'm having a great day actually. But I was just like, I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter if people like me or not. To me, anyway. Like, I'd just rather say my piece. Obviously, other people have it different. Like Elon Musk, for example, should very much care about people liking him. I think. Like, if you're a public persona that's reliant on the opinion of others, that's like one thing. But if you don't, I mean, just and that's beautiful thing about Twitter in general, right? When you want to be anonymous, you can be anonymous, and you can just say your stuff. If people disagree, they don't have to follow you. It's kind of great, and I feel like I've been not using it in that regard. I've
Here
just
we
been
go.
like reading. I've just been reading the bullshit that everyone's been posting, and just been taking it because I think there's like a lot of stuff, especially in crypto Twitter, that is just kind of like people just went down the deep end. And I used to be like, oh, I'm just gonna leave them alone. They can just do whatever. But at this point, I'm just like, well, if I see something that I disagree with, I'm just gonna tweet it. It's bear market entertainment, is what it is.
Thing is, crypto Twitter is bad enough for crypto, and then God forbid it goes outside of that into like politics,
Yes.
economics, sociology, whatever. It becomes a bit of a disaster. It's always funny. Like in my case, if I'm manic tweeting,
Mhm.
something's gone terribly wrong in my life, and it's like 3 a.m. in London. And I've typed out like 6 tweets in the last 2 minutes. Like send help. Whereas in your case, when you're manic tweeting, it's like you're having an amazing day. You're all over the place. All your topics are random. It's actually a counter indicator. You're in a pretty good spot when you do that, which is
Oh yeah.
curious.
I'm bad in like I'm in a bad spot, and I mean I've noticed this about myself. Like if I stop tweeting at all for like 2 weeks, then that's because I'm stuck in a shit position that I don't want to be in. And if I'm tweeting a lot, it's just because I'm having a giggle basically.
Yeah. Maybe we can count. You can sort of set up a count take profit indicator based on like your tweet frequency, volume, etc.
Oh yeah, short whenever I tweet a lot, long,
Yeah.
long whenever I
Exactly.
don't tweet anything anymore.
That's perfect. That's the real alpha. Thing is, your incel rant was quite funny because I read it after coming home from the gym, and so I was training today, and it was my posterior chain focused lower body day, so all the hip hinge type of stuff, stiff leg deadlifts, good mornings, a bit of leg press for some extra quad volume at the end of the week, that type of stuff. And there are two power racks, squat racks, whatever you want to call them. I was using one of them, and next to me was a very attractive lady who I think was Russian, and I say think, and I mean I'm fairly sure because I've got this weird thing where I can just tell that someone's Russian by looking at them with like a 99% strike rate. Doesn't matter if they say anything, don't say anything, if there's any other external information, I can just tell. Now the good news is I had a really nice chat with her. It was flirty. I made her laugh. It was great. The bad news is it all took place in my head, and in reality, I never said a single word. So, I'm making progress. That's what I wanted to get towards.
I mean, at least it's in your head. Like, at least it's something, yeah?
Yeah. I'll manifest it within 10 years, obviously. No, look, the whole thing about, like, we're veering wildly off topic here, but we're not going to pretend the market moved. So, what's the point? The thing about, like, talking to, like, girls at the gym, I've never done it in my life. I don't think I ever will. And the reason for that is, well, first of all, my self-image, self-worth is garbage. I don't think I'm worth shit, and I hate myself, so that certainly gets in the way. But the second factor is that I always kind of make the same assumption that I do for myself. That, like, I'm in there, for example, to train. I've got a job to do. I've got certain functions to perform. I'm in there to perform those functions to the best of my ability as part of, like, a periodized, intelligent program. And I do the job. I go in there, I do the job, and I leave, right? It's not a social setting. I'm not there to make friends or chat, haha, hee hee, fucking do whatever. I've got goals. Go in, do it, leave. And so I always assume that everyone else is kind of, even though when it's obviously not the case, I generally assume they're following something similar. So for that reason, I've never tried. I don't think I ever will.
I mean, I can give you a recent example out of my life that's just like not true for like most women.
Okay,
because so like I was at the museum with my girlfriend today, and we were
hold
like,
on, need to pour some
through.
drinks. you said the G word.
And we walked through, right? And there was like this chair, and I was like, this is like, why does this exist, right? Because it was a chair that looked like no one could ever sit on it and feel comfortable, right? And she was like, no, this is incredibly cute. And I was like, yeah, but I mean, it's completely useless. Like, a chair has one function, and that's you have to sit on it, right? If
so
you cannot
German.
sit on it, it's completely useless. Like, what the fuck do you want to do with a chair that you cannot sit on? She's like, yeah, but I want to have it. And then I want to put a plant on it. And I was like, what the fuck?
Oh my God.
This makes no sense. But it's just kind of how it works, right? So I think like
I'm wondering how on earth that's an example of the point.
No, so basically what I'm saying is like you're in the gym, right? And you're there just to work out, but I don't necessarily think that's like true for everyone. Like, I think a lot of women go to the gym to kind of like not necessarily pick up people, but like, I mean, they're working on themselves, and it's like a comfortable environment for, at least if it's like a decent gym. Some gyms are horrendous. And I mean, I've seen some shit in my day back when I was still working on myself instead of being a lazy slob.
Right. Secure the bag and retire, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, classic.
Exactly. Gaining weight, all that kind of shit.
Oh, great. I still don't have a clue how the chair museum story relates to people want to be approached in the, like, did you just tell that story so you could tell us you have a girlfriend again?
No. So basically, why I said it is because she wasn't looking for just the function.
I see. Wow, that's fucking contrived, Don, even for you.
No, it's
that's
not.
Such a reach.
And I mean, the function of going to the gym is going to the gym, right, and working out. But that's not necessarily like the most important part, I guess. But then again, it's coming from me. Like, I never did. Like, when I was in the gym, I was pretty much exactly like you.
Yeah,
I was like, why the fuck would you want to talk with anyone? Like, and especially like what always goes in my head, and we're going like wildly off topic here, is because I'm like, if I was that girl, I probably wouldn't want to be hit on.
Yes, exactly.
Like,
yes.
So I'm like, I'm just imagining myself in her shoes. Like, it's a good-looking girl, just gets hit on like 25 times during her workout, and she's just pissed off about it. And then you're like, why the fuck would I want to add to this? Which, I mean, is a fair point.
Exactly.
I think, but
That's always been my operating assumption, right? Especially like in this gym, there are a lot of sort of Instagram influencers and celebrities, and there are fucking tripods everywhere, and everyone's in all
God.
their outfits that are super coordinated and shit. And then you've seen what I look like, especially at the moment. You know, if I walk up to them, they're probably like, "Sorry, I don't have any change on me, but I can buy you a sandwich after my workout." You know.
I mean, that's a date in my book.
Yeah, I'll take you to the job center or the fucking soup kitchen.
Works.
Yeah, it's a start
Beautiful.
for sure.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
That's a
story,
real
right?
high
For a
value,
first
man,
date.
right?
Yeah.
First date at the fucking soup kitchen. Okay,
Sounds
wonderful.
good to me.
With that out of the way, presumably we do sometimes talk about charts and markets on this show. Although price has made it fairly difficult because it's been a week and you wouldn't be able to tell because the price is more or less the same, right?
Yeah.
It's almost a painfully arbitrary exercise to go over the higher time frames. So, like, I mean, the monthly has ages to go. I still think we're likely to see a sort of lower wick or more time spent at the open on the monthly, which is also the yearly open. I'd find it quite strange if we just mega mooned away from the yearly. We have like a $1. I'm obviously exaggerating, but the yearly wick is like the move below the yearly open is very small, and we sort of impulsed away from it very quickly. I'd be quite surprised if if we spent no time back there in the coming weeks or months. I mean, the weekly. It's an inside week, right? That's probably the simplest way to articulate what has happened or what hasn't happened. It's just an inside week, and that's it. You know, last week was green. No, red. See, candles are very difficult. This current weekly is green. The last week was red, and it's an inside week. So there's really nothing to say there. And on the daily, to absolutely nobody's surprise, we're still stuck at the range midpoint. And this is, I'm probably going to use this in the future as a prime example of don't diddle in the middle, because I don't think it gets any clearer than this, right? It's like below it, no breakdown. Above it, no breakout. Below it, no breakdown. Above it, no breakout. It's like, come on, this is just complete agony. And we've now even had like macro catalysts and volatility stuff that in the past would kind of push us around a little bit more with non-farm payrolls and other labor market data, and that has achieved basically fuck all as well. And we've also had small periods of like, I think it was a couple of days ago where S&P was dumping and crypto didn't do shit, and we were like, okay, eyebrow raised, I'm curious. And today, S&P, Nasdaq both up 1.6%, Bitcoin's red on the day, and ETH is up 0.8%. So you went from relative strength to relative weakness, and there's just no signal there. It's washy, especially at the range midpoint. So, I mean, what meaningful... do you have any new observations about price since we last spoke, at least on the BTC side? And if not, what would it take at this point to be a meaningful volatility catalyst if even this decently important macro stuff just isn't cutting it?
I think it's a good sign that we've had like both positive and negative macro stuff just go unnoticed basically by the crypto markets. I mean, we still have correlation, all that kind of stuff, right? But it's slowing down a little, and I like to see that. But it leads to kind of boring markets. And I think, honestly, the only thing that can change that is just a breakout. And I mean, the current range that we need to break out of to kind of start getting some volatility back is very, very tight. It's between 16.2 to 17.2. So like a $1,000 range that we've been stuck in for the last 7 weeks. Which is quite a bit, right? Like we've had so little volatility, even though we've had a bunch of macro news. We've had a bunch of crypto fears as well, right? So like Huobi.
It's Huobi, right? Has to be.
I don't know. Like I would never use the exchange, especially like I don't understand why people like use like exchanges like that. It always eluded me. It's the same with Poloniex. I wouldn't ever use it after Justin Sun has like touched it. I would like trade TRX, but that's the max.
Your maximum Justin Sun exposure is
the
token.
Yes, and that's like already quite a bit. But I know that I can dump that, because there's a market for it. I can dump it and I'm out. And if you like trade on his exchanges, you're kind of exposed to him anyway, and then you cannot just like leave if something goes wrong. So I don't really get that, but we've had some FUD on that front. We've had Binance FUD. We had still the whole DCG thing that's still floating around. All of that has taken taken like this has happened in the last 7 weeks, right? But we haven't had any movement whatsoever. So we've had a lot of negative news. Nothing's kind of been breaking the camel's back, which makes me a little bit more optimistic. But we still need to see some price action to the upside, and I think 17.2k is like a nice price level to eye. If we break that to the upside, it starts looking much better on the weekly. And honestly, the same kind of level almost is true for the daily, right? You could say 17.6. You could say 17.2 also works.
Yeah,
like
that
that area
cluster, right?
Yeah, exactly. That area is a really interesting one, and we're pretty close to it. So I think this just wants to consolidate a little bit further. And as long as the S&P doesn't dump, and it honestly, like, I mean, it's at monthly support. It's dumped a lot. I mean, Tesla is down like 75%. Like, we've seen a shitload happen there too, and I think it would make sense for the S&P to go sideways, or like kind of whatever, do nothing maybe. And I think that can lead to some upside in crypto, honestly. So I'm a little bit on the bullish side of things. I have been for quite a while now. But yeah, I need to see a little bit of strength. And I mean, 17.2k is a really nice weekly breakout level. So close above there, and then we start looking really good, and I think we could see some move. But right now, nothing.
I don't know, Don. That seems like a mega ambitious 2.5% breakout. I think you need to chill out on your volatility expectations. No, that all makes sense. It's stuff we've covered before, where like the daily range above 17.6 starts to look good. As early as 17.2, if you want to kind of get ahead of it. Which would be the Don classic trade, where you like buy ahead of the level that actually matters, because the level that actually matters doesn't actually matter, and it just moons past it. Literally some of the most frustrating stuff discussing markets with you in the past 5 years. Where I'm like, oh yeah, this level is really, really good. And then you'll have some shit level, and you'll say, if it breaks a shit level, it's going to turbo moon. And I think, what an idiot. And then it breaks a shit level and mega moons through my important level, and I just hate everything. But yeah, that's all sensible. So, I mean, technically, yeah, I mean, look, we're in the same range, back above the range high where we've had a fake out is good. The same applies to the downside, right? We've already had a failed break attempt at the range low. If that goes, then we're fucked. And the usual macro soup, as always, will also be relevant. You posted a really nice chart on Twitter, which had like, above here, okay, and then this is better, this is really good, etc. And I think that sort of summarizes the position very well. Also, you should take with a grain of salt market commentators who have been strongly shifting their bias over the last few weeks, because nothing's happened over the past few weeks.
Yes.
So like how good is their system, at least from a purely technical point of view, if there have been no developments in market structure virtually on any time frame whatsoever, and it's led them to like flip-floppy conclusions within that range? You should treat that with some skepticism if that's a function of your current news feed. But yeah, 17.6, 16k midpoint, still diddling there. Let's just get out of here, please. I think at this point we're all over it, and hopefully the catalyst that does that is positive. If not, we started off the new year with this Gemini Barry beef, and then it's sort of now Justin Sun stuff. So it just seems like continuation on the news front at the very least. Maybe no continuation on the price side would be a welcome excursion from the nightmare that was 2022. On the ETH side, it made a bit more progress in terms of market structure and trading through the range midpoint. I think it's at your equivalent kind of 17.2 level on the ETH daily, right? It's at the sort of pre-breakout cluster on the daily time frame, but I still think, at least for me, and as we've discussed on Technical Roundup, the range high is about, 1310, 1350, whatever, roughly around there. And similar to Bitcoin, we have already had one fake out attempt on that side of things. So if it goes for it again, then and closes above, more importantly, then that's more likely to be a real breakout than the first time round. So I think pretty much all the arguments we made for BTC in terms of its range and market structure can be made for ETH. On the weekly time frame, it's still hugging that 1.3k underside weekly level. Presumably your thesis is that if it flips that 1.3 level or 1280, whatever, and expands past it, that's going to be a pretty meaty move. Do you have a target for where you think that will go? So if the 1.3k resistance fails, what's your kind of first trouble area mentally?
So, I mean, there's still the 1.5k level, right? That's basically the all-time high of 2018. which I think is somewhat significant. But if we start breaking that, I think 2.5K, which sounds crazy right now, but I don't think is too crazy. But yeah, I think like if we break 1.3, it's going to be quick to 1.5, and that's where it starts getting really interesting. If you can flip that, I think it just starts making sense to expect much, much higher. And that would, in my case, be 2.5. I think anything in between there's like a few decent levels, but they've been tested before. There's not really been like any support on the downside between 2.5 and 1.5.
Sure.
And I don't think there's going to be much resistance, especially given that we had, like, if we come back up above 1.5K, we had all the chances in the world to dump. We didn't. We had all the reasons in the world to dump. We didn't. I think then it just starts making sense to put higher targets. It's the reason why I don't mind holding my Litecoin trade, right? Because I'm like, there's been plenty of reasons to dump. It hasn't done so. And I'm more than comfortable to just stick my neck out when we're in these kind of situations. Like when you just look through the cycles, both for kind of like Bitcoin and ETH, and you see like historic drawdowns of 80%, like multiple times. And then we have Bitcoin currently in a drawdown of almost 80%. It traded at 77% down. Like at those price ranges, I think it just makes sense to look for buys more so than for sells. And then you also have to adjust your targets a little bit higher, just to not sell the kind of like the big move. It doesn't have to be like the bottom, but even like relief rallies can double easily, right? It's not like you can just see doubles in the bull market. If people just like, if a coin goes down 90% and it doubles, it's still down a shitload, right?
Sure.
So like I tend to adjust my targets a little bit higher in those circumstances. That's why I think 2.5 is an interesting one. If we can manage to get back above 1.3K.
Just a
like
humble
I said,
2x, Don. Nothing
yeah,
major.
it's quite crazy, right? But it would still be, and I mean, ETH's been one of the best bear market performers, right? It would still be 50% from the top. Like
Sure.
it'd still be down 50%, which, yeah, I mean, if you have a bear market rally, that seems quite reasonable. Like retrace 50%, or like retrace like most of the move down, still be down a shitload, and then maybe go back down, maybe you go back to 1.5, maybe
Yeah,
go
it goes
back
to 2.5 and then $400. That's your swing call, Don. Got it. Thank you.
I mean, honestly, like if you're bearish, I think even if you're bearish, you have to have like, you have to be able to say that that is possible. Because I mean, like if you think this entire crypto space is bullshit, you still have to give it some room, right? And I think giving it some room is basically like, if it's really bearish, it should not go back above 2.5.
Sure.
But it can go anywhere in between, I think, and still be bearish. It's just, I don't know, like whenever price goes in these kind of tight ranges, right? And we just move like $10 up, $10 down in ETH case on a day, or in Bitcoin's case, like $100 or $200 weekly candles, people start losing the feeling of, okay, crypto can actually move big time. But then you just scroll out a little bit and you check the historic moves, and you see that they've been massive to both the upside and the downside. And I think people just tend to forget for some reason.
Well, there is a reason, right? The reason is that we've been in a bear market. We were in a bear market for a year, and we had 0 counter trend bounces that were visible on the high time frames. Like literally 0. It was it was straight down. Unless you count. I mean, on ETH is probably the only outlier in that regard. I mean, sure, there are a couple of others, but first of all, nothing compared to 2018. Because those were like some real treacherous lower highs that really made you feel like it was going to go back to all-time highs. And it came damn close, right? So I think the reason people have written off the idea of market structure shifting counter-trend rallies is simply because we were in a year-long trend that didn't have a single one. And I think a lot of people got burned waiting for that. Because even if they realize that, okay, you know, this seems like a downtrend, even in a downtrend, the market can make, you know, a lower highs and rally counter trend. And so if they were waiting for that bounce to sell, they didn't get it at all throughout an entire year. So I guess there is like a sort of recency bias there that makes people averse to the idea of larger type of lower high rallies, which is completely understandable. I agree with your analysis as well. As always, my targets, I'm much more of a coward and don't have the same targets. But the point that I specifically agree with is how basically 1.4 to 1.5K is pretty scary on the weekly. Because if you just take the weekly chart and turn it into a line chart, that's a kind of textbook baby pips TA LARP crypto cred market structure lesson in bearish market structure, where you've got high, low. I'll just quickly squiggle. You've got high, low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low on the sort of 1.1k swing low, and then even if the market rallies, the most obvious spot for a potential lower high, if you're going to get trend continuation, is at 1.4 to 1.5k. So I think if you're going to trade some sort of up leg, I think you need to do it Don style, where you just think 1.3k is going to break, or you do it once 1.4, 1.5k breaks. I don't think taking that trade into 1.4, 1.5k is like a great idea personally. At least not for me. There's no way I can take that trade, which is fucking unsurprising to everyone listening, right? It's just like preordained at this point.
No, but I mean, it makes sense, right? Like if you're running a strategy basically that keeps you safe from the bear market, and I mean yours has been, and I've been more aggressive, but I've been like almost none of my trades went to target, right, in the last year. I've still been making a little bit of money while doing so, but that's technically like a law of failed trades. It just turns out that I was like early enough to close them before it went to shit. So I think it makes sense to be cautious, and it makes sense to just kind of be like a little bit more defensive in general. I don't like every time I see this shit, I'm just like, these people don't know how to trade. Like I've seen so many comments being like, hey, like Cred doesn't say like doesn't give me a trade, and I'm like, dude, this has been down only. Like the fuck do you want to do? Like one of the best trades is just like has been walking away from crypto for the last 2 years, not looking at it, and now you're like back excited. You're like, you have the energy to look at, for example, the NFT market's been like giga rallying in the last few weeks. But everyone on Twitter and like everyone's just kind of so downtrodden because we've gone through this massive bear market that everyone's just lost their stride, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
And the reason is because it's been so depressing, right? So like walking away, not taking a trade, it's one of the best trades you can take in bear markets, I think, because it maintains like it kind of makes you stay healthier in a way, because bear markets lead to shitty trading habits and
Yeah.
lead to like shitty ways for you to see the world,
And
basically.
it's stuff you have to unlearn anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like eventually, like our generation had to unlearn the idea of just being mean reversion maximalists and every move is a bot and breakouts don't exist, they're not real. You know, we carried that luggage into the bull market and it didn't serve us particularly well.
Yes.
And so even if you have these bear market money making strategies, there's a good chance that once the market does start to trend and turn up, you're going to have to unlearn those and then relearn stuff that you unlearned because you were so active trading a completely different set of conditions. Although for what it's worth, as a bullish indicator for you, Don, I've been getting trolled for over a year for the whole lol, just take a trade, you haven't traded, etc. Even though I've been punting, I told you it was like between 30 and 50, I forgot the exact number, like intraday trades for the year. I'm just not the type of person to like suck myself off on Twitter, being like, oh, look how clever I am, I did this, that, posted in Discord, yada yada. I posted some live trade review stuff for like educational stuff, but I just got bored of that and didn't really take any since. But to circle back to the point, as a bullish indicator for you, Don, this is probably like right now at the time of recording, it's probably the first time it's actually getting to me now on like a personal level. Because in the past, I just kind of laugh it off and be like, lol, these idiots they're just getting fucking wrecked, and you know, all of their heroes are wrecked, liquidated, fleeing bankruptcy, doing whatever else. The entire industry has imploded. You know, my cost basis for selling BTC is in like in the 50,000s, the mid to high 50,000s. It's like a great position to be in. But I think after a year of getting bombarded with, you know, fake LARP, not a real trader, so boring, do you ever do anything, etc. I think finally the cumulative impact of that has, you know, I'm pretty fucking over it at this point. Like it's become an active nuisance when I do Twitter or shows or whatever else, which is quite frustrating. But that's just me being an emotional little bitch, I guess.
No, so. I mean, I at some point stuff just fucking annoys you, and it's really like this is why like social media can drag you a little bit, like drag you down. I think because then you want to be like prove them wrong, right? I mean,
Oh,
I
of
know you
course,
wouldn't,
yeah.
but it's like this kind of thing where it is really easy, and I've seen people do this on Twitter where they're like, oh, they just want to prove their haters wrong, and then they do stupid shit, right? And that's dangerous. It's in general like the social media thing, like proving your haters wrong, proving that you
The
like the
grind,
king.
bro. Yeah.
It's never gonna end well,
Yeah.
right? So gotta be careful with that. But yeah, it's just fucking laughable because the biggest funds in crypto and the biggest exchanges and in general, like everything and everyone that was able to get liquidated has been liquidated. It's insane. Like barely anyone's like is still alive.
Yes.
It's honestly kind of mind blowing to me that this has happened, like that's happened before we actually went significantly below the previous bull market highs.
Bro, it like
And
happened at 30K, realistically, right?
yeah,
Like
like
happened
how the
around
fuck is it
30K. So,
possible?
so these people had like they had money making machines, like literal printers, and had mega exposure to Bitcoin from like zero, ETH from like zero, a bunch of this VC stuff from zero, all the new fee generating programs and volumes in the most historic bull market ever, etc., etc. Literally just printing trillions and zillions out of nothing, and it took them less than 6 months to go negative.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just unbelievable to me. Like, Bitcoin went from 3K to 69K. ETH went from like $90 to 5,000 or 4,600 or whatever. All these VC coins went to infinity. The carry trade, buy spot, sell futures, all these arbitrage trades went to infinity. And it was like a 2-year period, just like all the VC money pouring into the space. Quantitative easing and the easiest macro environment ever. Loose conditions, like anything and everything you could hope for with the most unreal inflows ever for the longest period, and these are the incumbents best capitalized and best positioned to take advantage of it. And it took them less than a year, like it took them 6 months and like a 50% drop to give it all back. To give it all back and actually just end up in like bankruptcy, liquidated, hurting their customers, or doing whatever else. It's like actually fucking, like you couldn't make it up.
No,
like the space is just far, far, far worse in terms of the competence of people, quote unquote, at the top than I'd foreseen. And I was always very kind of didn't have much trust in these management structures, but it's just that much worse and made my pessimism in terms of the so-called smart people. It's just non-existent.
Yeah, but honestly, the interesting part is that it's this time it's hit people that have been around for a long time, right?
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
always shocks me a little bit, right? Because let's say you bought Bitcoin below 1,000 and you're big fun. It's kind of like everything went up for a long, long time, and now you're trading at 16K and you're bankrupt. Like, how the fuck do you manage that? I seriously don't understand. Like, you've got to be just increasing risk as price goes up, which just seems kind of crazy to me, given how volatile the space is. And if you've gone through like a couple cycles, like you shouldn't be falling for this shit anymore. But apparently, even the big guys kind of fall into traps. And this bear market has been, I think, the bear market to wipe out most of the people that actually have been a while in crypto, right?
Oh yeah, this is like the proper reset bear market, it feels like.
Yeah, because we've had bear markets like when Bitcoin was very, very young, where everyone got wrecked because like Mt. Gox and other reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that was when everything was very new still. This bear market crypto's been around for a while, so everyone that's been around for a while should have been at least managing their risk to be able to survive above 20K. I have no idea how this happened.
Also, it's not like how shocking is it? It's like, hey, if you look at the history of this thing ever, it quite regularly goes down 70 to 80%. So maybe if that happens, make sure you don't end up in bankruptcy court. Just an idea, just kind of throwing that out there. It's not like, I mean, yes, the macro stuff was unprecedented. I will grant that on any day. But the idea of this market correcting 70 to 80%, that's anything other than unprecedented. It's like the most precedented thing ever.
Yes.
It's literally cyclical. But I guess too many people bought the this time it's different type of thing. And then that didn't work in their favor. And I also found that there was a lot of real kind of arbitrary drawing lines in the sand for price, which is always super scary. So that the whole thing of, Bitcoin has never retested its prior all-time high in previous market corrections, and therefore that can't happen, and therefore all my risk stuff, as long as we're above 20K, I'll be okay. I didn't mean to rhyme that, but that was pretty cool. But you know, like if you take that model at face value and all these assumptions, then you're not in a particularly good spot. So it's this, you have to do this weird balancing act where to, you know, take seriously and distinguish the macro environment that is meaningfully different. But thus far, in terms of price impact, all this other stuff, it's been fairly in line with previous cycles. You know, you can't be that blindsided. It's like, I never thought Bitcoin could go down 80% or whatever. It's like, really? Based on what? But this is the issue. It wasn't like the market wasn't Bitcoin centric, wasn't ETH centric either. It was all these mega Ponzi's like Luna, etc., that the market was concentrated in, and they built up like a daisy chain, to use Barry words, of sort of lending and leveraged arbitrages, and that's what really, I think, put the most pressure on the market. It wasn't really the purely in notional terms sort of Bitcoin's decline from high to low. It was the types of illiquid levered arbitrage trades that the biggest market participants got trapped by, essentially. GBTC and Luna probably being the two main culprits, and then everything kind of followed from there. So good for you, I guess. Let's talk about Litecoin briefly. We covered ETH. As far as Litecoin goes, I enjoyed your rebuttal on stream and on Twitter. Once again, you know, it's very telling that every week you're like, you know, you are the fuck the haters guy just when it comes to your Litecoin. And the thing is, you basically made the argument that, you know, it's a high time frame swing trade. Yes, it's at resistance, but you know, why are you asking me? I'm going to be bullish because my targets are higher. And you know, if my swing trade is like, this is the thing, if you're swing trading, at a certain point you have to ignore lower time frame, less important levels of resistance. Otherwise, by definition, you can't swing trade, because you'll always be able to find a resistance level 1, 5, 10% higher. But the whole point of a swing trade is you're just swinging, right? You're looking for like a bigger, longer term move. And at a certain point, you have to just pick which levels matter if your trade is correct and which ones matter less. And so I've always found it odd as a rebuttal when you have like a weekly swing trade and someone gives you like an hourly resistance. It's like, that seems to be a kind of category error, if anything. So I'm guessing your views haven't changed much. I mean, the relative strength is sort of still there, or I guess absence of relative weakness, to be more accurate about it. But you know, Litecoin just, you know, at the moment on the daily chart, it's just retesting the previous pre-breakdown consolidation it's in, and the rest of the market's just been kind of slow in that area. Yeah, is there anything you think is worth updating this thing, or is it, like, I know the weekly level you have is around, you know, in the 80s, sort of 80, 85-ish, but presumably if your trade starts to look correct, you'd expect the previous swing high at 84 to be exceeded and to start filling in some of the one-sided selling through the summer into the triple figures, 3 digits, whatever. Is that broadly correct?
Yeah, so I mean, my trades basically, like you said, it's based on the high time frames. So I mean, I bought high time frame breakout, or like I anticipated the high time frame breakout, bought it, and then it did happen. And like just from the monthly, it's basically like we broke 60, so the next resistance is around 100 on the monthly, 100 low, 120 higher. Yeah. That's just, and this is how swing trading works, right? You just zoom out a little. It's the same as if you traded on the hourly, right? You would zoom in, like into the trade basically to see like, okay, what's there. But you don't necessarily, like, you don't have to change your mind on the 1 minute candle, right? If you're trading the hourly, you change your mind based on mostly the hourly candles, because that's where your trade is focused on. Maybe you go in a little bit deeper, maybe go in like a little bit further out, but that's where your trade is based on. So my initial idea is basically buying 60, looking for 100 to 120, just as a level to level play, right? That's a swing trade, but it's a level to level play. That's a 2x. It's pretty nice. And if I see strength there, I don't mind holding it to the next monthly level, which is 220, which sounds completely insane at this point. But given, like, this is just 2 levels away, right? If you had 2 levels on the hourly and you're like, okay, I think this level, if you show strength at this level, I think we're going to go to the next one. No one would bat an eye. It's just given that this is a high time frame trade. People are like, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's a time frame bias for sure, man.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, the thing is, this could take 12 months. This could take 16 months to play out. And that's okay. That's 12 to 24 candles if you go from 1 to 2 years. If you had like an hourly trade that took 12 candles to complete, that seems kind of reasonable, right? You're trading based on the hourly time frame. It's at support, you buy it, and then like 12 hours later, your trade is complete. That's reasonable. And it's the same thing on the monthly. 12 to 24 candles, completely reasonable. It's just people don't have kind of, like, for some reason, people just lose kind of the idea along the way, I guess.
Yeah, I
because
think it's
so
because
easy.
the volatility has been so shit. Everyone who wants to trade or even look at the market has to look at lower time frames because the high time frames aren't moving. And when you
Yes.
look at lower time frames, you kind of sort of tunnel vision your own view of the market as to what's a big move and what's a small move. So if your target is like not visible on the chart, it's gonna naturally seem unreasonable given how primed we are and anchored to more recent volatility. So all that makes sense.
Yeah, but
In terms of invalidations or like exit signals or stuff that you really don't want to see or stuff that would look scary, has the recent price action given you any new invalidation or kind of level where you're like, okay, now that
yes.
we've made this, I don't want to go below here. What does that look like?
Yeah, if you zoom in a little bit more, like my trade idea is based on the monthly, right? But I
Yeah.
still take information from the lower time frames, because if you just base, like, I obviously could just take the trade on the monthly and then just look every other month, but
Yeah.
I'm just a human. I'm gonna look at the weekly and be like, okay, if I get an early exit, I don't want to give back like 50% of my trade or more.
Yeah, imagine it looks
I'm
like shit and you're like, nope, I've got 20 more days left before I can look at this thing.
Yes, but honestly, like, when price was going down, like, I mean, traded this around a little bit, but when price was going down, and I was like, for a second, and everyone has this, you're like, okay, what if I'm like, maybe I should close, maybe everyone is right, and then I zoomed out on the monthly. I'm like, well, the first red monthly hasn't even closed yet. Just
Yeah.
chill the fuck out, and that's kind of like, this is basically what grounds me in the trade. Otherwise, you just like start losing your mind. If you just look at the lower time frames too much. But yeah, on the weekly time frame, I don't want to see another close back below 68. That's basically the first breakout of the range that got faded because FTX imploded. We dipped below it a little bit to retest the range high at 64, 63-ish,
Yeah.
right? And I don't want to see a close back below there. At that point, the range high starts looking vulnerable, and I don't want to have that. So that's on the weekly. And then when you zoom in even more, you have pretty much the exact same kind of invalidation, like 16. Like, if you start losing 69 on the daily, it starts looking really bad, because you have a high there. We broke it to the upside. We're trading back into the old range, right? The old range is 74 to 79. That's what we traded in before we retested the weekly range. So if you lose that range and then lose the nearest support, it starts looking bad as well. So like, I'm not entirely sure if I'm gonna close just because Litecoin closes below 69 on the daily, but that would be an early exit signal if I needed one. Like, if I'm basically like, I want to get out of this trade, it's starting to feel wrong, and then we start trading below 69 on the daily time frame, I could, if I wanted to. And I might if it happens. But
And it
so
depends what the
far,
rest of the market looks like as well at that point, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it also depends on, like, for example, a Litecoin Bitcoin pair gives a lot of guidance to me, where I'm like, okay,
You
should
make
I
it
change
sound
my
like you're
position?
spiritual guru. It's like, yeah, I get a lot of guidance from Litecoin, Bitcoin. Amen.
I mean, that's just the Bitcoin pair. It's a religious affair.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Oh, well, saying that, I made a cross, because I mean, you better.
Nice.
But anyway, that's kind of like, it depends, and it depends on what Bitcoin does. It depends on what Litecoin does relative to Bitcoin. There's a lot of things that
The
go into
S&P,
it.
the dollar, unemployment, CPI.
Yeah, but you don't want to get too lost in those, like,
For sure.
okay, what does Bitcoin do? Like, do I think Bitcoin goes up, down? At the end of the day, it's a Litecoin trade, right? So you want to focus on that first. But it's honestly, like, I changed, like, my basically my mental model has shifted to the upside a little bit, as in, like, I want to get out of the trade way before it comes back to 60. Like, I don't want to see it go back to 60. It's tested it once now. That's basically my entry. I don't want to see it go back there. So if it goes back there, That's me taking early profit. But so far so good. Like I'm
Yeah.
not too concerned. It looks good to me.
Would you add or trade around your entry if it does pull back close to your invalidation into the 70 handle or thereabouts?
No, I have my full position. Like the thing is, I traded around so I could get a bigger position
Okay.
before. And every time it moved 10%, like I had I had two 10% trades basically in this thing that
Nice.
allowed me to add quite substantially to the position. But I was like sitting there being like, if this goes up now, and I'm not in position, and I mean, it felt very uncomfortable because I have the trade idea on the higher time frames, and the worst thing you can do is trade around your position, and then lose the position and not be able to get back in, because then you're gonna be able, then you're just gonna see that you're gonna see Litecoin, for example, move up, and you're gonna cope so fucking hard, and this is basically the best way to make a really good trade into one that just basically fucks you over completely, because people tend to, if they have the right idea and then they trade wrong, they tend to trade even worse afterwards. So like Bitcoin or like Litecoin goes up to 100 or 150 and they're like, fuck, I was right, and it didn't do, like, it's doing exactly what I wanted it to, and I don't have a position anymore. Let me just buy it from 150 to 250, right? And that point, it's just like you're just taking a shit trade. But you want a revenge trade because you feel wronged by the market, but the only one that's really wronged you is yourself. So that's something that you don't want to necessarily do. Sometimes you get good signals to increase your position by trading around it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it all the time. And right now, I definitely don't want to. Like, I have the position I want to have. I'm going to hold it unless I'm forced out of the position, and I'll see how it goes.
At this point, only is allowed.
Yes,
Everything else is a travesty.
please.
Yeah. My favorite version of that idea of fumbling like a really good trade idea and just kind of devastating yourself with bad execution is, you've probably seen this before. Let's say someone's really bearish and the market's like close to a resistance level, and that gives them like a very clear bearish directional bias, and they're like, oh, I'll just scalp long into my target, you know, or like,
Oh,
or the other way
yes.
around, they're like really bullish and like, I'll just scalp short into my target. Oh, that's so terrible. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone doing a good job of that. But most of these habits that you've discussed are kind of done out of boredom for the most part, I think, for people, especially when you're dealing with high time frame swing trades, which may require you to do nothing for days or weeks. You're going to want to fiddle in between, especially if the market's moving. And even though those movements have no impact on your underlying trade thesis, you kind of feel like you should be doing something. And that's usually a recipe for not particularly good decision making. I want to talk about Tron and Sol, and then some equities stuff. Tron, there's more Justin Sun news flying about, and Huobi, not particularly good news out of there, with apparently communications being shut down for like staff, and he's telling them he wants to pay them in stable coins and this, that, and the other. He posted a long, useless, bumbling thread earlier where he just parroted CZ. Where he was like, ignore FUD, keep building, yada yada, security, and it's just like a complete nothing burger thread, which just felt like an extended version of Steady Lads deploying capital, or whatever the term was.
Yes.
So I think that's been reflected in the TRX price, and I just don't know. This chart doesn't look, at least on the USD pair, that there's really nothing here. It went sideways from like basically January to November or thereabouts, sort of September, October. It broke down from that range, kind of grinded, and now it's puking into the lows again. There's nothing particularly interesting there. And on the weekly time frame, kind of similar breakdown, consolidate, top of the range, spike, back to the wick area, which seems like someone's defending it. Couldn't possibly guess who that is. But those types of things aren't my favorite. I know at one point you and I discussed the TRX BTC pair, which had this weird sort of, post-breakout consolidation thing going on, for lack of a better term. And that that hasn't fully invalidated or broken down yet or done kind of anything too crazy. But with all these rumors and the USD weakness, presumably that's, Tron in general. And, even just looking at the watch list today, everything is more or less around the daily open with a couple of exceptions, and this thing's down like 3.5%. Presumably this isn't top of your list for cycling or rotating into or anything like that?
Not necessarily. I like it, honestly. Like, I mean, I hate everything Justin Sun touches. It's just how it is. But on the, it's an interesting coin, because most of the stuff is, if you just cycle through 100 coins, they're all the same basically, and they've all underperformed Bitcoin heavily during this bear market, right? It's only really like a couple that have been able to keep up. ETH's been doing wonderfully. Monero's been doing really well. Litecoin's been doing well lately. XRP's been doing okay. And TRX has been doing really well too, right? Just, I mean, you can just look at the BTC pair, and you can see that that's been outperforming Bitcoin for basically since end of 2020.
Sure.
But obviously, I mean, just looking at the USD pair, that's like a bad look. So for me, honestly, what you want to be seeing for TRX, if you want to trade it, and I think it's an interesting one. It should be something that people watch, just based on the fact that it's been outperforming all the other shitty ones, and it's been trading differently than other coins, right? So you don't necessarily want to be trading the coins that all look the same, because I mean, you can, but then you can just buy a random one. But you want to be looking at the ones that trade differently than the rest, and TRX is one of them. So I think if you see a move back above 0.063-ish, as in that weekly breakdown, the last one, TRX USD starts looking good, and I think that's what you want to be focusing on. TRX BTC, I mean, that just looks decent to me. There's a lot of FUD flowing around, and I wouldn't even call it like unjustified. I do not trust Justin Sun. So, I mean, like I said earlier in the episode, wouldn't want to have any money on his exchanges. It just doesn't feel right. But the BTC pair does look okay to me. It's basically straight up breakout upwards, and then just complete sideways.
Yeah.
No pullback, no nothing. That's good, right? You want to see, like, in an early bull market, which sounds stupid to say given we're deep into a bear market, but this is like an early bull market kind of chart where you have a leg up and then just straight sideways, not even like going back to the breakout level or anything. It's just straight sideways. That's a good look. It's just, it has to transform on the USD pair, and it has to kind of perform there. If it doesn't, I mean, it's not enough. If this wasn't TRX, I'd be saying, hey, this looks really, really good, and you want to be buying dips. But it's TRX, which makes me hesitant.
Sounds like you're xenophobic. We can add that to your list of Islamophobia and homophobia, Don, at this point. You're collecting them like Pokemon.
But yeah, I honestly, like, it's an interesting one. It's on my watch list for a reason. It's just, I don't like to hold anything that has Justin Sun involved. So I'm a little bit more cautious on that front.
Understandable.
So I'm not gonna be buying it anytime soon, I think.
Speaking of dodgy people with the surname S, let's talk about Solana. No, I'm joking, obviously. Don't sue us. It's all a prank, bro. Anyway, in the last newsletter, there was a banger title which you didn't even mention. At this point, you're so used to it that you didn't even give me a complimentary pat on the back, where I said Samani Cell Program sullies Solana sentiment. And nothing, not a single word, not a peep. And I'm like, this is...
I was actually chuckling about it.
I feel unappreciated enough as it is on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, these small wins that I get from little titles and jokes, I thought, you know, you could at least give me that to tide me over. Alas, I'm asking for too much. We talked about this thing because Vitalik came in and saved it with a tweet, basically.
Yes.
And then the market shorted it again and got blown out again. And it's up, you know, the low came in at like $8 and the high was at like just under 14 or just past 14, which is a fairly sizable move. But at this point now, it's kind of traded back into the pre-breakdown consolidation. The way I mapped it is on the daily time frame, with the lowest close at 11.8, the highest close at 14.6. And then the midpoint is where the market is right now at sort of $13 or thereabouts. In any case, sort of retesting the pre-breakdown area. Do you, like, how important is this reclaim and sort of not puking at 12 or whatever else? You know, if you were going to add more risk to your crypto exposure more broadly, how would you get on board this thing, if at all? Is it interesting? Is it one of those breakout plays where it's like above 14, it'll start to fill in and do all that type of stuff? Like, what do you think?
Honestly, I really like it. we discussed this while it was happening on the live stream. I think was live stream. Was it this? I think it was last Friday, right? When we talked about it,
I think
where we're
so.
like, okay, yeah, where we said, hey, it nuked, and we both almost bought it, and now I wish I did. I just
Yeah, and I
like I,
almost made money, and I almost am happy with my life.
yes, and I mean, the reason why I would like to have it is because I mean, even at this point, it looks good to me, and it's already went up like 66%. That's quite a bit. But yeah, if I had to, the only reason why I didn't is because of other positions already, and I
Sure.
have enough risk as is, so I don't necessarily want to add more to it. But if I didn't have any other positions, and if I wasn't like, if I was looking for an active trade, I really like Solana. I think around like $12 looks really good, like 11.75, that low. That'd be an interesting buy. I'm not entirely sure we're gonna get that, honestly. And then, like you said, $14, $15 is big resistance. I think, like, and you mentioned 17 point something too, right? 17.5.
Yeah, I think the weekly level. Do you remember that single red candle that ended up being amazing? That comes in at actually about 14. Like a
Yes,
lot of the range high confluence is just around $15. Do you think this
exactly.
is 50 IQable? Like above 14.5, 15, and just send it to fill in a lot of the selling? Maybe at least to the 17 range high, if not, into the 20s. Do you think something like that
Hmm.
is reasonable?
Yeah, I think that Solana is a really good play, basically, if I'm right.
Sure.
Which means if crypto goes up, I think there's a lot of stuff to squeeze out of Solana. I don't necessarily think this is going to be trend reversing or it's going to be the saving grace of Solana, but I think
Sure.
there's a trade to be made there. There was a trade to be made there when it was lower, which is obviously much better than
Mhm.
now. But I think there's a trade to be made there. So I like it. And I do like the zero IQ $15 to, I think you can take the $15 to $19 zero IQ trade.
Yeah. Yeah. The swing
That's,
high, basically. Yeah.
yeah, basically from that breakout level to swing high. But it's, it's, um, it's a tough one because it moved down so much, and then obviously the bounces are going to be bigger. We had a lot of bounces on Luna as well, but I wouldn't necessarily compare this to Luna. That's the thing, because I think Solana has actually people interested in it and has people working on it. So this is basically just bad news, but it's not coin ending news, which makes this, I think, in general, a buy at some point. It's just a question of when. And I liked 12. Like I said, if I didn't have enough exposure already, I'd probably buy at 12 if I get to, and then see how it looks at 15 or 18.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and if
Yeah,
it
that's very
doesn't do
reasonable.
that, honestly, if it doesn't do that, and this is the thing, when you have a lot of opportunity left and right, sometimes I'm just like, okay, if it goes here, I'll buy it, and it doesn't go, it's too strong, and it goes up. I'm like, well, shit, whatever, buying something else.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the end of the world to
And you
miss a
already have
trade.
risks. You're not scrambling to put something on
Yes,
at this point.
exactly.
And you mentioned the active development community. I think that's right. Like they've also got the Solana phone, and if you hold one on speed dial by default, it takes you to the welfare office at this stage in whatever jurisdiction you're in. So there's some really some product market fit there for Solana holders, which is really bullish. That's kind of all I've got for altcoins. I know Lido's been going up
Oh yeah.
a fair bit. The sort of ETH staking type of argument slash narrative. Market cap's kind of low-ish, not our usual purview, or like slightly outside what we normally discuss. But it's been strong, and if you think the market's going to continue to be strong, then generally, at least your starting point should be what has been strong will likely become stronger, and then if you're convinced that something is mispriced, you can look for the sort of this has been lagging, but it will eventually catch up. But I think for most people, if you're going to take an expression of strength on the market, just look at what's already been strong. So
Yeah.
much outperformance in the bull market came from people who ignored strong coins and tried to buy the laggards because they felt they were late. And then it turns out the laggards were lagging for a reason, and it wasn't a particularly good one. So I mean that's the very least on the radar. Legacy to top it off. I mean, if you look on the S&P 500 4 hour, this is just a bizarre chart.
Yeah, it
Like
is
for this
very,
type of
very odd.
market to have like 2-3% ranges, moving just sideways and into news releases and whatever, is quite wild. But it's also one of those unfortunate ones where it's between levels, where the earliest monthly is sort of 3760, and it's not below that, which is good. But then the important breakdown level that you and I kind of harped on about for ages is the 3900 level, and it's not above that either. So it didn't break support, which is good, but it also broke down from support and didn't reclaim it yet, which is not good. So that thing just seems, even on the daily, I mean, this compression's insane, right? Like,
I mean, look at it on the
range-bound.
weekly. It's the last 2 weeks been
Yeah,
nuts.
it's like invisible candles, basically,
Yeah.
at that point. So, yeah, I think some meaningful price action will come from the higher time frame levels, as opposed to, like, it's sort of unsurprising to some extent that the garbage price action is between the high time frame levels, as opposed to taking place at the structure. But yeah, I think the overall thesis, no need to overcomplicate it. If the market isn't going to be garbage, it has to stay above the monthly support, right? And everything else is kind of almost window dressing to some extent. It certainly starts to look better above 3900, but 3710, 3760 is sort of a very useful line in the sand as far as this stuff goes. Nasdaq, which we sort of talk on and off about, it kind of looks like garbage. So maybe almost worth ignoring that one, because that's just close to the lows, straight up, you know. And fell out of the range as well. That 11-1 handle has been cooked and sort of looks a bit scarier. The thing that's changed meaningfully, I mean, Tesla's continuing to puke, you know, and sort of doesn't look great. The thing that has changed meaningfully since we last spoke, or at least was before I clicked on the ticker, was the dollar index. Before the show, I was like, oh, we'll get to talk about the breakout attempt in the dollar. That seems a bit engulfing it at the moment. So maybe it's just a bullshit move or whatever. But I'm still kind of scared of this thing, for lack of a better term. Because, you know, not to repeat ourselves, but dollar strength has been very bad for risk assets. And we've had like the worst dollar quarter ever. And the market's still hanging on by a thread. And it's approaching support at sort of 102, 103. If that generates any sort of visible bounce, even if it's like a lower high move into, I don't know, 108, 109 type of thing, that would be some very unwelcome pressure on risk assets. So we've had the luxury of a weak dollar for like weeks and months, but in terms of progress, very little to show for it. There's a lot of these risk assets, both the indices and single names like your Apples, Disneys, Teslas, ARK, whatever, they've been getting decimated. So I think that's one to keep an eye out for.
I mean, the thing is, it's really odd because the Euro USD chart on the quarterly, which I know a little bit of a meme time frame,
those levels
because
of fire.
But it's like, if you look at the range low, it's 1.0, what was it?
5.4?
05? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we reclaimed that.
Yeah.
And we retested it, and it held so far.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, just 4 days into the quarter.
Let's go.
But this is quite a strong chart. And if we didn't have any like underlying bias, I think we'd be saying, hey, this is a reclaim. This is something to watch out for. It's massive strength off of a breakdown, right? And we did have all the euros going to zero. I don't know if you remember, but the good old days when we were trading below $1, where people were freaking the fuck out. And we reclaimed the range, right? So a lot of FUD below is 1.04. We broke down massively, and I had one of the best quarters in a long, long time.
Yes.
So maybe the dollar just keeps on being weak.
That's what you need to see, right? Like, any alternative is pretty scary. So you want
the only reason why you're worried is basically because we've barely been able to hang on with this happening. And you like even a retrace would start looking really shitty, which is not the greatest situation in the world.
Yeah, but the thing is that there's still a bit of space, you know? Like, if you look on the dollar monthly, I was lazy and just boxed out the pre-breakout consolidation, that single red candle in May, before the upthrust really started. We haven't tested that yet. And that's between 1017, 1032-ish. So there is still space for like a final puke, which would give some breathing room to risk before this thing arrives at an area where you could more reasonably expect a rally or a lower high or some sort of slowdown in the selling. So I think it still matters. This daily is quite shit, because I thought it was just going to close green and be a breakout candle, but it's not the case. But yeah, still on my radar for sure. Our off-topic rant took up a lot of time. We can speed through a few of the headlines that I have got planned. To be fair, there are a fair few, but we can do a sort of lightning round on them as I open them up, and a lot of them cross over, unsurprisingly, because the space sucks, and everyone's it's a very especially if it's like the centralized lending space feels particularly incestuous, and so one goes down. I mean, Barry again was prophetic, where he says a daisy chain of borrowers. It just turns out that Genesis was one of them. The first one I've got is Three Arrows Capital founders subpoenaed by tweet. Did you see that? The official liquidator of 3AC, in charge of bankruptcy proceedings, emailed them, but also then as proof posted the subpoena on Twitter. And the court kind of acknowledged that as a valid way of presenting it, which is hilarious. And part of it reads: the founders have unfortunately resisted cooperating in these efforts, and as such, we have received authority from courts in both the US and Singapore to serve them targeted and comprehensive discovery demands through email and their frequently used Twitter accounts.
It's
so that's kind of crazy. I mean, I just feel like I'm living in some sort of loony fantasy world where Sue and Kyle just kind of came back. And they're tweeting like nothing happened. And worse than that, actually, they're tweeting like they're the victims of a big conspiracy, that they got hunted and they did everything, they were caught on the wrong side of all the FTX malfeasance, and, they're sort of back and looking for justice. And also, from the rumors I've heard, are raising for a fund and looking for a redemption arc, like a crypto-specific one. So that to me is quite shocking. While at the same time, while this kind of victim image is being portrayed, they're getting served by liquidators for their firm. And also, look, as we've argued before, there is a very big and meaningful distinction between a risk-taking business which blows up, which is kind of fine. It's what you'd expect in the risk-taking space. But I think what sullied people's made people particularly cynical about the 3AC case is that allegedly they were borrowing money once their financial position was blatantly distressed, and they were misrepresenting that, and also borrowing money from like close friends, associates, and other people without fully disclosing their financial position. And if that were disclosed, then perhaps they wouldn't get that money and the contagion wouldn't be as bad, allegedly. So I think that's kind of where the dissonance comes in, right? On the one hand, you're like, if you just didn't know anything and you go on their Twitter, you'd really feel like they were wronged and robbed and they're looking for justice. But then you sprinkle on the fact of the alleged misrepresentation of the funds and who they borrowed from and on what basis, etc. Like the story isn't. Then they don't seem to be the victims here. So yeah, bit of a crazy one.
Yeah, the thing is, like, when you combine basically the fact that they never really took any blame for what they did and immediately start blaming others, and the fact that they basically went and borrowed from everyone that would give them money while they were distressed, like that combination is just a very, very bad look.
Yes.
Which, I mean, honestly, I'm very disappointed by. They could have, if they didn't do those two things, right? The thing is, like, most of what they traded with, at least at the start, was basically their own money. And if they just kind of lost their own money, there's no real reason why people would go after them. But at the end of the day, like, if you borrow money from others, and it took the whole industry down, and we're still dealing with the contagion of lenders just being completely fucked, and basically negative attention from basically the entire world. Like, everyone's looking at crypto being like, this is just fucking fraud, right?
Yeah.
And then going on Twitter and being like, hey, this is not our fault. It rubs me the wrong way. It pisses me off. I would like to be like, okay, you fucked up, just happens. But in this case, like, it's just, I don't want to. If you give me a good apology for basically acting the way you did, or not even me, because it's not for me, it's for the people that kind of gave them money and then got fucked over. That's like one thing. But I don't really see any of that. I just see posturing on Twitter, which, I mean, just pisses me off, right? And I'm not even the one that got defrauded, right? Crypto prices went down. That's the only negative that I had from this. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know. It just pisses me off.
Imagine you lent them money as one of their close friends or associates, allegedly, and then you're reading that stuff on Twitter. Can't be good. Genesis cuts 30% of staff in latest round of layoffs. unsurprised. I mean, Genesis, the whole thing has just been a disaster all of last
Yes.
year and this year with Gemini Earn. Again, this is the biggest lending firm in crypto, which has just stopped, which is quite shocking. And then there was this bitter back and forth between Barry and one of Cameron Winklevoss on Twitter. Just a disaster. And I guess now we, at least in the past, this has been helpful as well, but especially this time around for this cycle, with all these senior executives leaving, man, that was, like early before the entire thing blew up last year. Man, that ended up being a good signal,
Yeah.
So that's something to look out for. But yeah, obviously Genesis is distressed, more cuts, and still quite shocking that there's no resolution to this story. Apparently there's some promissory note January 8th type of deadline coming up. I don't know how significant that is or whether we'll hear any developments. From what I've read, it's just still back and forth between Genesis and the creditors, and they're each accusing each other of not reading one another's proposals. And as we've discussed before, when it spills out onto Twitter, that's when there's been a real breakdown in communications, and when you're dealing with truly kind of juvenile levels of coordination. More on the cuts. Silvergate shares plunge as company cuts workforce amid transformational shift. So Silvergate was kind of the crypto bank for a lot of these exchanges, funds, firms, institutions, and so on. They were tied up in the FTX fiasco and debacle, and there was a run on that bank as well, some sort of investigation. And I mean, at a time like this, with this amount of like fraud, blow up, implosion, and bankruptcy, and given how difficult it has been to get banking relationships in the past, when they all get concentrated around a single bank, that's obviously going to attract a lot of negative attention in these circumstances. And I don't know what crypto banking is going to look like in the future, but it's probably going to be even worse, like probably worse than it ever has been, apart from maybe super early Bitcoin days. But now I think from now onwards, more than ever, it's going to be crypto banking in general. I think is just going to continue to be a disaster, and a deserved one, I think, at this point. So yeah, more cuts in the industry, and just kind of also shows how. Given the amount of institutional inflows and just kind of the transformation of the asset class and just the large amount of money in it, we made very few material developments on like the banking relationship side, and now it's going to be even more difficult going forward. So that's some Silvergate stuff. I'll get your thoughts on this one as well. Regulators say not so fast to Binance US acquisition of Voyager Digital. So the regulators, including the SEC, filed motions asking a judge to halt Binance US's acquisition of bankrupt crypto lender Voyager Digital until the company discloses more about its finances and relationship with its global parent company. Now, I think Binance International is a bit of a black box from that point of view. So I think it's very unlikely that their transparency requests are met when it comes to the second provision there with regard to relationship with this global parent company. And dude, what a shitty roller coaster this has been for the Voyager people. Hey,
yes, that's what I wanted to say.
Their funds fucking disappear, and then FTX comes in to rescue them. Then FTX blows up, and then Binance comes in and says, "Don't worry, we got you." And then regulators intervene. I mean, disaster.
Yeah. I mean, it's just honestly just that. I don't have much more to say or to add, but it must suck if you have money on Voyager, because you feel like you're gonna get bailed out and then you get the rug pulled twice. It's just not nice. I have no idea how all of that is gonna end up. But I do agree with you. I cannot see Binance opening its books. I'd be surprised.
Yeah.
They've been valiantly defending their books, basically, sure. Which I mean, you don't like to see, right? Obviously, you want to see more transparency, but it's just what it is. I also don't like to see the whole centralization of crypto into Binance right now.
Which is what it is, right? Functionally.
Yeah.
Like 75% market share. It's a functional monopoly at this point.
Yeah, it's horrendous. It's horrendous. And that's a really, it's just not good in general. But yeah, I wish the Voyager people, like everyone that has money in Voyager, the best. I hope that kind of turns out nice. But yeah,
it's not being made easy.
It's not. It really isn't. And I honestly, the worst part is that they keep on giving them hope, and then shit happens.
That's the rough part. Crypto exchange Huobi says it will cut staff by 20%. So Huobi spokesperson said the crypto exchange would lay off 20% of its new employees. The news comes amid rumors that Huobi's new owners have cut off key staff communication channels. And also there was like a big buy wall on the Huobi exchange token that someone posted. No prizes for guessing where that might have come from. A recent internal Huobi email, translated into English and obtained by the block, states that all domestic salaries will be paid in USDT, with staff required to register a Huobi account to receive salary. It further indicates that year-end bonuses have been cancelled, along with various other benefits, including welfare subsidies. Huobi spokesperson said that it is incorrect that bonuses and benefits have been cut. However, yeah, it almost just feels like more of the same like last year, right? Yeah. You have centralized exchanges, sort of in over their head, put charitably, or at the very least just financially distressed and having to make cuts. It doesn't help that like Tron is nuking. You've also got this USDD stablecoin, which like it's functionally like a slightly differently built algorithmic stablecoin that's supposedly over collateralized, although I've seen some analysis suggesting it's only 75% depending on how I calculate it. But that entire ecosystem, again, as you mentioned early on, I don't have much to add there, but I'm not a fan of it. And it's just not nice when you're trying to like get a risk on appetite for the market and you've got all these clouds hanging over you, like Genesis and Gemini still going back and forth. You know what the fuck's going to happen there, and DCG kind of affected by that as well. Then you've got the Silvergate stuff, Binance Voyager stuff, Huobi stuff. It's like, we couldn't leave this into last year, could we? Like we had to carry it over to start the new year as well. So that definitely sullies the sentiment. And this was the most recent one where SEC probes FTX investors on due diligence procedures, which is very surprising because this is quite rare in my understanding. And they didn't even do this for the Theranos one, that sort of miracle Elizabeth Holmes medical blood testing, whatever company. To my understanding, that didn't even happen for Theranos, but it's happening for FTX. And the SEC is seeking details from investors on their due diligence on collapsed crypto exchange FTX, according to report from Reuters. Good, I guess. Investors could face scrutiny over whether they met their fiduciary duty to their own investors. Now, the thing is, I'm not sure what this will achieve, because I'm very tempted to argue that anyone who had access to the books or some sort of ongoing transparency into FTX's activities should have seen something and should have flagged something, and there should have been alarm bells and red flags going off, right? That's sort of the base case you want to make. However, if it's true, as has been alleged, that FTX itself was, as far as the information that the auditors got and the accounting team got, for all intents and purposes, the part that was visible to them was a money printing business, and it's indeed this back door that Sam allegedly built where only like 2 or 3 mega senior executives knew about it, and it was all done in a way that wasn't visible or transparent, etc., then what could you expect of the investors, right? So it's a kind of a tricky question where you can punish and sort of criticize the due diligence or lack thereof of the investors if they had like a reasonable degree of access and transparency into FTX as it was set up. But if it is the case that there was some really like impressive cover up and fraud and backdoor and all this other stuff, where even a diligent investor who looked through the information available to them, if that information is by definition false and limited and in a way that was obfuscated very well, then I personally, as much as I don't want to say it, find it hard to blame them, because they could only really work with what they could see and what was available. Now, obviously, there are other criticisms that you can make, like there was no, independent board of directors and all this other stuff. But if the fraud is as sophisticated on a kind of backdoor basis as it's been purported to be, then I don't know how much the investors could have done. I mean, more is my gut instinct, but I'm almost in a weird way kind of sympathetic if this backdoor fraud ended up being very good,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's always easy to say in hindsight.
Yes, of course.
And this is the thing, right? When you judge stuff, it's from perspective of hindsight. And I think, like you said, if it was as sophisticated as it seems to be, how the fuck would anyone have known? It's obviously good if people kind of had an inkling and invested investor money anyway. Is one thing, but I very much doubt so. But the thing is with crypto, right? When it goes crazy, people just want a place to put their money in. So if there's an exchange that is like, hey, give us money, they'll throw at it, no matter kind of the specs or whatever behind it. They're just like, this is an exchange, people are using it. here's my money. So I don't know. I feel like it's rough to judge. Really, this is
Yeah.
what makes crypto great. That whenever people rush in, they just rush in like mad, and there's just so little. Like the space is so little that just everything goes up a shitload. So I don't know. It's this weird thing where I would like to see if someone is truly responsible. I want to see them be judged for it. But it's also I can kind of understand where like the investors come from.
Yeah.
A bunch like they seemed very very reputable, and I mean they had connections with all the right agencies,
Yes.
which I mean honestly it's kind of a joke when you look at it from that angle, because they keep on having like dinners and stuff with the SEC members.
Testifying in front of Congress over their margining system and the liquidation protocols and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
you come out and you're like, hey, if you invested in this, you didn't do your due diligence. But I mean, then they should have done their due diligence, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
what the fuck is this shit? Like, this is what they're for.
Yeah,
Like all
instead they
these
were having
agencies.
meetings with them over exemptions and other stuff.
Exactly,
So,
and
yeah.
I think that is kind of laughable, honestly,
Oh, for
because
sure.
that's how it usually goes, right? You have these big frauds, and then afterwards they're going after like, for example, people that invested, which I mean I get, but they should be looking inwards as well and being like, how, I mean, we should have seen this one coming. Or if not, then it's hard to blame someone else, right? If you're an agency that is kind of working on this stuff, and you invite them in for kind of guidance, and it turns out that they've been like doing shady shit all along, and people trust them because you have close connections with them, it's just kind of bad look, honestly.
Yes,
Like
I agree.
the agencies just kind of look like fucking clowns in this one.
Paid for, type of.
Yeah.
I mean, purely on a self-reflective basis, that's probably what pushed my bias in the wrong direction. Which is that I thought, look, if you're lobbying the CFTC and the SEC and Congress over regulatory matters and margining matters, and across the board in terms of regulatory actions, compliance, the crypto space, from a futures point of view, from a DeFi point of view, even if you were shady at some point, presumably you've cleaned up your act before you go and do that. But what didn't seem terribly likely is that you're taking all these regulators head on, and also taking on some very powerful incumbents like the CME head on, while, by the way, running the largest Ponzi scheme ever.
It's just
That to me seemed
the gal
unlikely.
of it.
You'll forgive me for being caught off guard by that. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's just odd. It's just not something you would ever expect, honestly. Basically, I mean, they had no reason to run it as a Ponzi because they made so much money anyway.
Yes.
And then there were in bets with the regulators. So I mean, why the fuck would you be doing that if you were running a scam? Because then you're just pulling attention. Like it's all so fucking odd to me. Like even now, I'm confused how this all happened, and like all these kind of strategies. I mean, I don't get it. I'm just baffled. Which I mean, yeah, it's just sad.
Yeah, I think one of the main issues is that the thing is, normally, as we've said before, you'd let your risk-taking business fail before you let the money-printing, shovel-selling exchange fail. But they were so fucking commingled from the start that you it's like when you put your headphones in your pocket and take them out 10 minutes later. You can't untangle them for the life of you at that point.
Yeah.
Maybe you could, but I mean, you just Caroline, way too hot for Sam, obviously, and you just couldn't do it. And a bunch of other stuff which we've covered at length before. And this brings us to our final point. Bankman-Fried tells FTX debtors to leave his Robinhood shares alone. I don't know if you see, there's a big fight over his 450 million stake in Robinhood, where he's essentially arguing that, look, like if you take it away from me, basically I deserve it more than the debtors, because for them it's only financial loss, whereas for me, if I can't pay my legal costs, I go to jail forever. That's essentially the argument being made in the brief. And now BlockFi is fighting over it as well. Sam is saying it's his. The debtors, the estate is saying it belongs to them, should be given to the creditors. It's a complete mess, complete disaster. Let me see where. Yeah. The withholding of costs necessary to an adequate criminal defense can constitute irreparable harm, the petition added. Conversely, the FTX debtors face only the possibility of economic loss. Think of me, says Sam. Think about me when it comes to my Robinhood shares. So yeah, clown world.
My Robinhood share. It's a joke. It's a fucking joke.
Yeah,
like he uses investor money, and he uses people that actually just put money on his platforms, money to do dumb shit. And then he has the balls to fucking go in court and say, please leave my Robinhood.
They're our shares more than they are his, you know?
Yes. What is this? It's just absurd. It's absurd. It's a Black Mirror episode, honestly.
Yes.
This entire last 12 to 24 months have just been a Black Mirror episode. I cannot believe it. You couldn't
no more
make
seasons, please. No more seasons. Just cancel the show.
Stop it.
Enough. On that very positive note, I'm going to let you go, Don, because I know you've got real life commitments to stick to. To our audience, thank you for listening to Casual Friday. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like the video. Instead of clicking off the episode's over, just hit that button. It'll make a difference to my life at the very least. Don doesn't care; he's over it. But it is good for the channel. Thank you for your support, Duck. Have an awesome weekend. To all of you, we'll see you next week for the normal deluge of content. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.